last thing I want to talk about this week is the fact that on August 21st, Manny Pacquiao is going to fight Errol Spence, which is a fucking crazy fight, man. I've been calling for that one for a hot minute, right? At welterweight to figure out who the best welterweight is. It's like Spence, Pacquiao, and Crawford all got to fight each other. The only way we find out. There's 10 guys at that weight that are great, but these are clearly the top three. And everybody's saying, like, did Manny get old? Did Manny get old? Manny hasn't fought in 2 years. So, no, he didn't get old. Maybe he got rusty, but he hasn't been taking punishment to where he would just somehow look way worse than he did against Thurman. I don't see that happening. I think there's a possibility that there's a little bit of ring rust, and this would be the wrong guy to have a little bit of ring rust against. But Manny's in this fight, man. If you don't think Manny Pacquiao's in this fight, you haven't been watching him very much. The guy's won 62 fights, and there's a reason for that. Because every time he moves up in weight, that power carries, and his speed and his timing and the awkwardness with which he throws his punches and his combinations, it's hard for anybody to handle. And that's why Keith Thurman couldn't handle it. He got caught in that first round. He was never right after that. And he's doing that to guys that are bigger, stronger, faster, younger. I think Errol, the question is always, is it Errol or is it Crawford? Right? I think everybody pretty much knows that those are the top two guys. But Pacquiao is the money fight, and Pacquiao is the legend in the weight class, and that's long since established. That's 10 years that's been established now. And I think it sucks for Terrence Crawford that he's been boxed out of this equation. That was actually one of the first things I thought was, what about TC? Who the fuck is Bud gonna fight? And it's tricky because this is a fight I want to see too. There's a part of me that I'd rather see the winner of Spence Crawford fight Pacquiao, but sometimes in boxing you got to take what you can get a little bit. Like, I'm always one to say don't buy this, whatever, but this is a great fight. And I've been saying this for a long time, like, at a certain point it's on Terrence Crawford to have the career that he wants to have. If he feels hostage to Bob Arum, he should do everything he can to leave. If he doesn't feel hostage to Bob Arum and he's cool with being the odd man out of, like, the hottest division in boxing, then that's also on him, right? I do think that Bob Arum has not done a good job with his career. And I think it's because Bob has an old way of thinking about it. He thinks, and I've heard Eddie Hearn talk about this, but he really thinks that Terrence Crawford works for him. He doesn't think that he works for Terrence Crawford. And that's where he's got it fucked up. He does work for Terrence Crawford. And so he needs to make sure that his boss gets the best fights he can, because he's considered one of the 3 to 5 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. A lot of people call him number 1. I don't know how they do that because he hasn't fought anybody. And that may or may not be his fault, but it's just a reality. He hasn't really fought anybody. And I just think, like, if Terrence Crawford wants to have a legendary career where he fights his contemporaries, then he has to make a change. I don't know how he does that. I don't know when he does it, but he needs to, because he's never going to get any of these fights. That's what I figured out, because they've figured out that they can do it without him, because they got everybody but him, right? They don't need him. And you may be watching this going, what do you mean they don't need him? He's the best guy at the weight. But everybody else at PBC can fight each other. And there's big money fights like this one. This is one of the best fights you can make in boxing. Pacquiao at Spence. They don't need Terrence Crawford to make Pacquiao Spence. Right? So they're going to make Pacquiao Spence. So Crawford has to make himself more accessible to the welterweight division. I'm not saying if that's right or wrong, but that's what he's got to do. There's no other way. He's going to keep fucking watching from the bleachers. And that would be a shame for somebody with that much talent that I would even call a legend now, having not fought any of his contemporaries. You know, it would be a shame if he went his whole career and retired without doing that and without us getting to really see that, you know? Because I think Kell Brook is definitely the best fighter he's fought. And, I mean, Kell Brook is barely in the top 10 at the weight anymore. He's a really good fighter, really strong technician, great jab, but it's just like, you got to fight these guys, man. You got to fight Sean Porter. You got to fight Keith Thurman. You got to fight Danny Garcia. You got to fight these guys, man. You got to fight Ugas. You have to fight your peers. You know? And everyone else in boxing has to fight those come-up fights before they get a mega fight. But Terrence Crawford doesn't have to. You know, what contenders at welterweight has he fought to deserve these fights? And I want to see it. But I'm just saying, who the fuck has he fought to deserve it? It's all eye test. If you think he's the best on the planet, it's all eye test, because that resume is fucking thin. Thin. And I love watching him. I love watching him. And I have him number 3 on my list. Purely off the eye test. Right? There's no one on that resume in the top 10 other than Kell Brook. Kavaliauskas, maybe. But there's not, none of the elite welterweights are in there. So if he could maybe even get a fight with Josh Taylor after Taylor just beat Ramirez, that's a fight I would also love to see. You know, but I think he has to take charge of his career. You can't let Bob Arum have charge of his career anymore, man. It's a new era. It's a new era. You can't relinquish the power of your whole career to these fucking promoters. You just can't do it. And if you're going to, you better be in the best position possible to get the best fights possible. Otherwise, you're on the fucking bleachers. So